Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar for the semester, but not forever. We will be back. Today's webinar is called From Outrage to Action, and it is about taking your strong feelings for wanting change and making them real in the world instead of just stated online. Your presenters today are me, Allegra Davis Hanna. I teach English, and I'm the Humanities Department Chair, and I'm really here just to act as a Vanna White, if you will.
Terry Gross.
Okay.
Vanna White doesn't talk.
Sure. She does now because Pat Sajak's in the medical leave. You didn't care about any of that. Also here with us today is Sherry Mata, who's a professor of psychology, and Misty Wilson-Mertens, who teaches history and is our department chair for social sciences. Shout out to all of our students who are joining us live or watching this recorded. We're very excited that you're here. So let's start. What are we talking about today?
So we're talking about how we go from digital outrage to actual action.
Okay. Why is that important?
Well, this is something that has been studied a lot in the last 5 or so years. All of the data I'm about to give you is relatively new, and this is an emerging field of study.
Okay.
So just keep in mind, everything I say now could change in 10 years. Because digital media in and of itself is still relatively new. We're still kind of getting our heads around this.
Yes.
Because of social media and because it's very easy to share information, Americans are now more informed, sometimes more misinformed than we have ever been before. We talked about this when we did a previous webinar, but if you're exposed to more than 2.5 hours of news in a day, you are likely to have skewed perceptions.
Okay.
Because a lot of our news is leaning towards a bias.
Sure.
Not based in reality.
Or at the very least focused on one side of things or another.
Yes.
Okay.
So because we are more informed, because we're more likely to gauge, because we're more likely to share, we've also seen the rise of what we call social media activism. And part of this is around hashtags. So sharing a hashtag, including a thought or a story with a hashtag, including your own personal feelings about something with a hashtag, has become pretty common online. So these are not in any way an all-inclusive list.
Okay, sure.
But some of the big ones that you've probably seen: Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Make America Great Again. All of those are very, very, very common hashtags you're likely to see if you go online. So what you have in this graph here is our changing perception about the internet.
Okay.
So if you look at when the internet really was kind of first impacting our lives, we have this idea that it's going to be this great force for good.
Sure.
That it's going to do all of these amazing things and become a much more democratic force in our society.
Yes.
Then you look at our perceptions today, and you can see we've dropped by quite a few points. That this is not the be-all, end-all good thing we thought it was going to be.
So we see the pros and cons.
We're starting to see that, yes.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of criticism around this idea of social media activism. There was a headline I found from the Daily Nebraskan this year that said social media hashtags are not real activism. And people are going to be critical of this, call it slacktivism or hashtag activism, armchair activism. And their
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their argument is that this poses a minimal cost to participants. So it really doesn't engage me. It really doesn't cost me anything to just retweet, to share, right? But that doesn't tell the whole story. If we just dismiss it at that, we're missing the bigger part of the ongoing conversation. So a lot of groups use this. A lot of our nonprofit organizations, a lot of activists will say, please retweet, please share, please get the word out. And the reason they're doing that is because this slacktivism is likely to lead to deeper engagement by a very small number of people. So what you're seeing here is a tweet from Sister Helen Pagine, and she is tweeting about something I'm guessing most of you are somewhat aware of because this is local. Rodney Reed is scheduled to be executed in Texas in a couple weeks. Or actually next week, right?
Yes.
The 20th. And there are some real problems with the case. And you could see that from both perspectives. But this has become a social media issue. And it's leading to deeper activism and deeper engagement. A call to action, so please share, please retweet, please spread the word, gets you 51% of a larger audience, at least. And depending on your Kim Kardashian, it's going to be larger than that.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. And a small number, depending on what article you read, that varies from as low as 1% I've seen to as high as 12%, that will become more deeply engaged. But if that's 12% you were never going to reach in the first place, that adds up.
So online activism has some limited degree of real life impact.
And I think this is a good example of this. Because without the social media of this particular case...
Yes. And there are a number of celebrities who are tweeting about Rodney Reed.
Ted Cruz is now tweeting about this. So it's really amplified. But it would not have gotten that way if Sister Helen had not started it.
Okay.
So it's amplifying your audience, and that's becoming more likely engaged. The trick to this is the people that become more deeply engaged have to have a private, active engagement very, very early on. So if I see this and I just retweet and then I just keep scrolling, I'm likely never to become more deeply engaged.
Right.
But if I see this, I retweet it, and then within the next 24 hours I say, you know what, I am going to send an email to Greg Abbott. Or I'm going to reach out to my senator.
Because it doesn't last very long.
Right. I feel good. I clicked it. I can move on with my life. But if I'm more bothered,
right,
and I take a private action,
yeah,
something that's not on social media, something that's not for public consumption, I'm doing it because I feel personally motivated,
yeah,
then I am more likely to devote actual time and effort to this cause.
And I mean, so what you're saying is, even though not everyone who retweets it is going to do something about it, those amplifications of the message reach more people who may do something about it.
Yes.
And if celebrities and politicians and other, I guess, influencers weren't involved, it wouldn't reach as many people.
Exactly.
So even if all Ted Cruz did was retweet it, he amplified it.
Well, and he's reaching an audience that Sister Helen is not.
Exactly.
So then you're getting a whole new up to 12% of people engaged.
Yes. Okay.
So you're amplifying the amplification.
So it doesn't do nothing.
It doesn't do nothing.
Okay. So some critics of online activism, of hashtag activism, say you're just tweeting something. It has no real consequence. In fact, it may be more harmful because you feel like you did something good and it keeps you from doing something that really matters.
From actual good.
But you're saying it's not all bad or all useless.
Right. Because
Okay.
if I've never heard of an issue before,
Yeah.
I can't become involved in it.
That's true.
So the awareness of an issue can lead, not does lead, but can lead to deeper engagement.
Okay.
So the next thing you have here is a history, because I'm a history teacher. It's a history of a hashtag.
We know.
Yeah. So I wanted to show you guys that social media activism is in response to real world events. So if you chart hashtag Black Lives Matter, and this is just an easy one to pick. And it's also one that Pew Research had a nice graph on.
Sure.
But because I don't make graphs on my own that are this pretty. But you can see when real world events happen, that hashtag increases.
Mm-hmm.
And when that hashtag increases in conjunction with those real world events, that's when people are going to get engaged and get motivated and actually join nonprofit groups, or maybe create nonprofit groups, become volunteers. And maybe this is simple as, you know what, I'm going to get registered to vote. And I'm going to help change the system that way.
Psychology would actually agree with you on that. Psychology would 100% say that when something happens in the real world, that individuals are more likely to be engaged in some type of help, whether it be time, money.
So, yeah, when it's not theoretical, when you're responding to a real event,
Exactly.
it's more likely to spark. So, do you think the more often a person sees a hashtag, the more likely they are to engage?
Yes, and that's for anything.
So if I see Free Rodney Reed once, I'm like, oh, somebody's on death row. But if I see it 10 times, I might be like, I'm going to look into this.
Yeah, and statistics show just getting somebody to register to vote, it takes 5 times of them hearing about it before they'll actually register to vote. And that's a very, very low cost, easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So the higher the
Should
cost.
I say you should register to vote 5
Yes.
times during this
Yes.
webinar? Okay,
Yes.
here's one. You all, if you're eligible voters, should register to vote. There's one.
And if you're not, register other people to vote.
Exactly.
So 69% of Americans, this is all coming from the Pew Research Center, 69% of Americans feel that these platforms, Twitter included, are important and have a purpose in creating social change, which is essentially what activism is, right?
Because
I'm
you
joining a
first-
cause.
You first have to have awareness, and without that
Yes.
awareness, then you have no action.
And the other thing that research has found is that marginalized groups are going to see these platforms as much more important to them than groups that dominate the mainstream narrative. And that completely and totally makes sense.
Sure, because you don't have the same access as groups that have more privilege or who are less marginalized.
Right. So, for example, in this case, Black and Hispanic Twitter users responded to this in really, really high numbers, and they were likely to get engaged based around this hashtag because they saw it as representing their point of view. And they saw this as a media campaign they could control.
Okay.
And they weren't going to have this hijacked.
It doesn't be filtered through other groups
Exactly.
of people. Okay.
Now, the downside of this, of course, is that
Anybody can tweet with it and
there's no one leader, right?
water down the message.
Or
Yeah.
confuse the message or kind of go off the cliff with the message.
Sure.
Like if you don't have one leader, it's harder to follow the story.
Yeah.
And so when you're like looking at a hashtag like Black Lives Matter, you really do have to sort through that and see who's using it as the hashtag and who's using it to criticize.
Yeah.
You can't just count them.
Yeah.
So this becomes a little bit more difficult. So Professor Mata is going to get us from fake world, social media, to the real world.
Yes, psychological characteristics that would lead someone to action are typically all identified by psychologists. If you have passion about a particular cause, if you have some type of dedication, determination, or maybe you're doing this in honor of a loved one or some type of tragedy, then you're more likely to take action based on something that you see. As an example, if you've lost a loved one to mass shooting or any kind of gun violence, you might be on the Sandy Hook Promise website or any of the other various websites that are promoting a type of gun control, or at the very least, let's not let everybody purchase machine type guns that can cause mass killings in seconds.
So if you've been personally impacted,
yes,
you're more likely to advocate for something in the real world.
absolutely.
Okay.
So existential theory, which is one of my favorite psychological theories, states that one of their tenets is that when something happens in life, whether it's a tragedy or whether it's something that makes you angry or something that makes you sad, if you have some type of emotional response and you're more likely to try to make meaning out of it. And if you can make meaning out of a tragedy, you can find some type of purpose. And all of that, making meaning and purpose and having that emotional connection, will propel someone into action a lot more quickly than just seeing seeing a website or seeing a hashtag or seeing something, as you're scrolling through Facebook. So oftentimes what takes somebody from inaction to action is basically the same thing. They want to see justice. They have some type of meaningful connection to that. As an example of justice, the Innocence Project is a project that I'm real familiar with, and if you're not, you might want to look into this. It is a program that exonerates individuals who have been convicted wrongly. They use DNA testing, they use reform, they use the criminal justice system, and what they're trying to do is to prevent further injustices. So this was started by two individuals in 1992 who worked at a law school in Chicago, and their mission was to free the staggering numbers of innocent people who were incarcerated and to bring some kind of reform to the system in general. They are responsible for this entire program, the Innocence Project, which now spans over multiple universities and colleges. The Innocent Project has been in existence for about 25 years now, and they're shedding a lot of light on the systematic failures of the U.S. criminal justice system. Now, if you know somebody who's been wrongly charged or is serving time right now, you're more likely to look into this than someone who does not have any kind of connection to anybody who's been to jail or prison. But they began this organization when an individual named Marion, who was born in South Carolina, was wrongly incarcerated. And he was just a manual laborer. His reading level was at a second grade level. His IQ was in the 70s. And these two detectives in the Bronx, they just arrested him for a rape that they said he did when he was actually at a Bible study at his sister's house. And there were witnesses who testified, no, he was here at this Bible study. But you know, the criminal justice system wrongly incarcerated him. And since DNA testing was really not invented then, they didn't use it, obviously. But after the fact, when these two individuals, Cardozo School of Law, and two individuals, Peter Neufeld and Barry Shrek, I believe his name is, or no, that's Shrek is not his name. Shrek is a Disney character. It's Shek. I'm not pronouncing. I'm probably butchering his last name. Anyway, these two individuals from the Bronx were like, no, this is not cool. So they got the case overturned. And now I know that UTA, Texas Wesleyan's law campus, which is now I think A&M's law campus, but in other law campuses and students in law school participate in this type of project. But that's because they have some type of emotional investment to law. As another example, a tragedy, MAD, Mothers Against Drinking and Driving, was officially started at a kitchen table. And there's at least one MAD office in every state in the United States, and there's even some in Canada. So this would not have happened had someone not lost their loved one to drinking and driving. MAD officers have multiple goals, not just to keep people off the streets drinking and driving, but they want to provide alcohol safety courses. They want to reduce the number of individuals who are involved in time and time again getting DWIs. They go into school systems, different ISDs, and have presentations. They have actually reduced the number of DWIs and accidents because of drinking and driving by half since they have been in existence, which is phenomenal. But again, there's a tragedy here. There's some kind of injustice here. There's someone who is emotionally connected. The next example I would like to give you is Janies House. I'm not sure who all is aware of this particular organization, but this is a house that's located on 82 acres in Youth Village's campus in Bartlett. It's right outside of Memphis. There's enough space here to house about 14 women or young girls at a time, and they serve dozens and dozens of females annually. In addition to their residential accommodations, they also have a 3,900 square foot house with access to 24-hour medical care, therapeutic support such as counseling. They also have outdoor living spaces that overlook a scenic lake. And all the inspirational murals were created by Steven Tyler, who is of the band Aerosmith. I'm not sure if you are aware of his song, Jamie Had a Gun.
Yeah, and I think he just opened a second one this year.
He did. And he obviously had some type of emotional connection with women who were abused. I've not actually read the entire story, but maybe it was a friend of his. Maybe it was a sister. It could have been his mom. But there's some type of injustice again. There's some type of emotional reaction. The last example I want to give you, it's a personal example. My nephew, Corey Taylor, was murdered 6 years ago in Houston. He was visiting friends, and subsequently, my sister started a nonprofit called Journey Forward. She wanted to be able to help mothers who had lost a loved one, whether it be their spouse or their child or sibling, due to gun violence. My nephew Corey was murdered by someone who was recently let out of prison. He had multiple violent convictions. He had just gotten off the ankle monitor, and why he was released, we don't know. He was subsequently charged and is now serving time. However, these types of organizations don't just start overnight. The first thing that she did was to reach out to mothers when she saw a news report for individuals who were affected by gun violence in a local type situation, maybe Mansfield, Arlington, someplace in the Metroplex area of Texas. And her mission was to provide those individuals with support, one-on-one support. And subsequently, she's received federal funding, $150,000 a year from our governor's office. And that was through writing a grant application. And her nonprofit Journey Forward now offers support with trauma and grief counseling for free. All of the services are for free. She helps victims apply for victims assistance, which is offered through the Attorney General's office. They will provide you with reimbursement, monetary money reimbursement for counseling, mileage to and from the hearing or to the DA's office, and they medical reimbursement for any kind of treatment that you've had to have, and a few other areas. So because she had trauma, tragedy, and injustice, she is now making sure that there are hopefully less individuals affected in this area. She not only has her own nonprofit in Mansfield, Texas, but she works with Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. She works with Moms Demand Action. She works with all of these other nonprofits that began because someone was affected. There was a personal connection, and somebody either had some kind of tragedy or there was some type of injustice. So those are the psychological characteristics that surround someone moving from, hey, I'm just reading this and this is sad, or somebody should do something, to actually spending time or efforts.
Before we move on, I have a question about this. Mm-hmm. Is there any psychological research on what getting involved in this way does for victims' families?
Yes, it moves someone. I actually was going to talk about that here in a little bit. But individuals who make meaning and have some kind of a purpose that comes out of a tragedy, they will heal faster. They will be able to get back into society and be a mom again, be a dad again. Because believe me, a lot of moms that I've met don't even want to get out of bed.
So there's a psychological benefit.
Yes,
to
it's
doing
called
this.
Post-traumatic growth is what we call it. So you have PTSD. A lot of these individuals have this post-traumatic stress disorder where they have consistent flashbacks. They really want to die. They have suicidal thoughts. They don't want to live anymore. And a lot of them will turn to drugs, alcohol, or prescribed medication.
For like a numbing effect.
Yeah, for a numbing effect. I don't want to deal with life. So research shows that if you change your mindset to, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. No, but I'm going to make sure, other individuals don't have to go through the same pain and heartache. It's normal after tragedy and losing a loved one, or watching someone be in an abusive relationship for years and years and years and finally get out. It's normal to have negative feelings. But there are some things that can actually make it worse, and there are some things that can actually make it better. And we really want to stay away from, obviously, the things that make it worse. So those things are personalizing it, saying it's my fault, where I'm going to have all this guilt. And this is backed up by Seligman and a lot of other researchers' work, that the pervasiveness is the second one. Personalization, pervasiveness, and permanence. If you're sitting there thinking that this event affects every area of my life, the pervasiveness of it is, it's all my life. I can't do anything else now. I can't go back to school. I can't go back to work. I can't get up and fix my kid dinner. I can't do anything. If you have that mindset, it's obviously going to keep you in a negative place. Also, if you have the belief that this is permanent and it's never going to get any better, that will also, it's normal to have to personalize it. It's normal to have that pervasiveness. It's normal to feel that it's going to be permanent. But you have to get out of that mindset. Those are the first kind of things that actually happen psychologically.
So it's normal, but you have to go
Yes.
through it. Don't wallow.
Yes, you have to get through it, and you got to pick yourself up by the britches and stand up and do something. And if you do stand up and do something and make meaning, you will find yourself getting stronger and stronger, which changes your mindset, which gives you that post-traumatic growth. Some other things you can do is, write about it. Allegra, you as a English professor know how writing poetry or journaling can actually affect your being, your psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So writing about it, whether it's getting the message out there in the media, or whether it's journaling to yourself, or writing a book about it, can also help. So that would be important. So there are some other ways that you can get involved. But some of my favorite resources for individuals who have experienced these types of tragedies are these 3 books that are listed here. The Angel Inside, which is about Michelangelo and his sculptures in Italy, and it's about this young man who is lost, doesn't know what to do with life, so he takes this little trip to find himself, and in the process meets an elderly gentleman who gives him wisdom, and it 100% shows how Michelangelo's work, him sculpting an image, is related to or equal to the imagery of someone making change in their own life, being sculpted as we grow and as we learn. The other one is a little controversial. It's called Thy Son Liveth. It was written in the 1800s, I believe the first, or either late 1800s or early 1900s, before a lot of people bought into spiritualness of other beings, loved ones having spirits that cross over, those types of things. So it's another really good resource. The last one is Man's Search for Meaning, going all the way back to existential theory. If I can make meaning from something, I'm gonna be more successful in life and have a happier life. Viktor Frankl was a doctor who was interned in the concentration camps. So his very first half of this little small book is about his experience there. He lost his wife. He lost everyone. He was the only one who survived in his family. And the second part of the book is about his theory of existential meaning making and having that post-traumatic growth.
And I think I just want to point out that regardless of your personal belief set or preferences for what kind of books or stories or media, there are books that would appeal to you, right?
Yes.
So these are great recommendations and these are Sherry's recommendations, but if they don't necessarily resonate with you, look for or ask for recommendations that are specific to an experience you've had or something that you've gone through that would appeal to your beliefs or interests or sensibilities, because there's something, for everybody.
Yes, and one thing you want to make sure that you're looking at the validity and reliability of the author, because you don't want to grab a book that's hokey pokey.
Unless you're looking for the hokey pokey.
So other ways to get involved. One important thing as you're going through college, you want to get into your field before you actually graduate. That's going to set you up for success after graduation. You don't want to be a student who graduates, has a degree in X, Y, or Z, and cannot get a job. So be sure and do some internships. Even if you volunteer one day a week for a semester or one weekend a month for 2 semesters, do something. Volunteer, intern. You can also do an awareness campaign. You can donate time, money, resources. If you know there's a women's shelter by your home and you've got a lot of extra clothes or maybe some children's books, they could use those things. So get involved.
And I would say if you're in a student club, student
Absolutely.
clubs are actually required
Yes.
to do some
Yes.
community work. So if you have a passion project you're interested in, there's a student club out there that's going to want to help you. You
Right.
just got to plug into the right one.
And if you want, as a student here, if you're interested in doing some volunteering or some activism, connecting with an on-campus or an online student organization can help you find a place to use your energy for good.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And if you have things to donate, find a place that wants them, right? You can't just show up at the homeless shelter with a truck full of bars of soap. Maybe they don't need soap that week. So find out what they do need and how you can connect what you have to what someone needs.
And during this month of our Veterans Awareness, don't forget about your veterans and don't forget about those who are serving us now. You can always send care packages.
There are, yeah, and I mean, it sounds kind of rudimentary, but if you say, I'm really worried about X, Y, or Z, or I care a lot about something, if you just look it up, and there are charity navigation websites where you can make sure that the group that you're working with is valid
Mm-hmm.
and that the proceeds go to who they are intended for. And we can put some links underneath the video to connect you with some of those charity navigation websites. And it's not about donating money necessarily. A lot of it is
Correct.
time. A lot of it is energy. Sometimes it's putting things in an envelope, putting a stamp on it, and mailing it out,
Sometimes it's knocking on doors.
Yeah. So
Sometimes it's sharing a tweet.
yeah. And I mean, we all have a set amount of, maybe not set, but we all have a finite amount of money and energy and time. And so we really just have to decide how we're going to use it and what we care about and whether we want to move the world forward or not.
But if you try to fix all the problems at once,
Yes.
you will burn yourself out.
And yeah, absolutely.
So pick and choose what's most important to you. And if you're interested in this PowerPoint, I have a couple of links in it where you could read more about the nonprofits that I spoke on and a link to where you could get involved with those specific nonprofits. So if you're interested in the PowerPoint, I'm happy to send it to you.
And we'll include Sherry's contact information in the video description at the end.
So I don't know that anyone has a live question, but
While they're thinking of a question,
let's talk about how you get credit.
because let's be honest,
That's why you're here. So we have spent today really talking about connecting theory and idea to action. And hopefully that's something that you can apply not just to volunteerism, but to things that you are learning in your classes. But in a few minutes after the video is over, we will post a link in the video description. That link takes you to a survey. If you fill out the survey completely and accurately, then you will, your information will be sent to your instructor. Individual instructors decide whether to give you credit, extra credit, or whatever you get.
one of the questions we're including this time is about the spring webinar series.
Yes.
We have decided that it is going to focus on the 2020 political process.
Is that something that's important happening?
Something's happening.
Go vote. Go register to vote. If you have not
Oh, yeah. I
registered
haven't
to
said
vote,
it 5
please
times.
register to vote.
Well,
Yeah, register to
that's
vote.
two.
There we go. Register to vote.
So if you have specific questions, if there's something about the process you don't understand, something you would like more information about, or even a candidate you would like more information about, let us know, because we're beginning to put together that series right now. And the more questions we have from you guys, the better series we can make.
And definitely register to vote.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're eligible. If not, help others to get registered to vote or raise an awareness in other ways about issues that are important to you. Absolutely.
Hashtag register to vote.
But
I
on
don't know
Texas, you can't do it online.
That's a different story. So the link will be active for 48 hours, so until Friday afternoon. And after that, you'll have to contact your instructor to see if you can get extra credit. It's up to them. And keep in mind that lots of instructors don't add extra credit until the end of the semester because that's what they do. So I promise they're getting the
don't
information.
email them every 10 minutes.
I promise they're getting the information. So I'm going to check. Nope, we don't have any questions. That either means that probably means we just did a very good job explaining it all.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
it's definitely not that we're towards the end of the semester and people are stressed out and studying for
That's
tests
not
and
it.
things.
It's not it at all. Thanks for joining us, and we will be back next semester with all new webinars just for you.